I fully agree with the premise that traditionally data collection, analysis, and interpretation have always been a researcher's domain. But however, in the last couple of decades, I would say that the trend has been shifting towards non-academia in a way, making meaningful contributions to all the three aspects that we are discussing today: data collection, analysis, and interpretation. Now, part of this shift is also fueled by the spectacular rise of data-driven techniques in the private sector, which also contributes to a rich variety of methods, tools, and techniques for wider use. And for the social impact sector, the other part of the democratization, if I may say, of the data-driven technique, it is spearheaded by a very passionate group of non-academic public policy enthusiasts and also academics who care and share a keen interest in social impact just beyond academic interest. Now, the question in front of us is that if this is the case, and though there is a positive shift, what do we really want, right? So what we want is to present a framework to start the discussion on how organizations and on social impact measurement specialists can collect and use data for an effective day-to-day decision-making process. So I would say that there are three major areas and levers which organizations should focus on. First is leadership. I think that leadership who will foster a culture of data plus decision making using data is the foremost thing in ensuring that people use data on a day-to-day decision making. So it's important that we have role models in the senior leadership who, through recognitions, acknowledgements, some and other sorts of structural enforcement, actually be a leader in making sure that they are using data to take day-to-day decisions. The second lever is actually so the organizations need to actually invest in training and capacity building and open source softwares, and training and capacity building because the entry barrier is so high for organizations to invest in data-driven decision making that open source software and also certain training materials that organizations like CHAPAL and IPA and edX and platforms like Coursera have put to is something that organizations need to invest in to get their employees up to speed. And this can also be facilitated by other specialist organizations like us. The last one, which is the long-standing partnerships, and I also think that this is really helpful. So whenever an organization is in partnership with another one, say for an evaluation or for a monitoring exercise, then it is really needed that we move away from the output-oriented transactional attitude to a learning partnership. So in ID Insight, we call the learning partnership to be an open-ended, long-term involvement between a program-focused organization and an evaluation-focused organization, where both organizations can learn at every stage of project management that what is the best way to use data for decisions. And this is particularly important in three aspects: learning about how to formulate the theory of change, how to formulate your monitoring process, and also how to do your own process evaluation. So once you do all of this in these three areas that I just mentioned, I think we can make a good step forward towards using data-driven decision-making in all organizations and also democratizing its use. So a typical project management will have three big phases. So one is the planning phase. The second is the actual implementation. And third is when you do the evaluation, which is mostly done by third parties. So when you do the planning phase, there is a series of subtasks that need to be done to actually ensure that the planning is robust. So in needs assessment, in stakeholder analysis and mapping, in project design, in M&E plan, in baseline study, all of these are components of the planning stage. And in each of these phases, we can think of primary and secondary data that can inform a good output for that particular substage. So for example, for needs assessment, we can definitely think of secondary data for similar projects and primary data from beneficiaries, which can inform our needs assessment. Similarly, for stakeholder analysis and mapping, we can depend a lot more on primary data through interviews and also secondary data for similar projects. The project design and log frame is where we should depend mostly on secondary data from similar projects and evaluations that have been successful. The M&E plan in itself is something which is specialized job and will require a little bit of third-party support, I would say. And the baseline study is completely a primary data where we go and see what the condition of our intended target beneficiary is. So this is all the data that you can use at every substage of the planning stage in itself. Now, when you come into the implementation, that's when people think that probably we don't need a lot of data, but that's completely not true. Because for large programs, we should be able to think during implementation that whether a midterm evaluation is needed or not. And midterm evaluation should give us data and evidence that can be collected, and a feedback loop can be set up so that the program can actually be modified if need be while the program is rolled out. And secondly, there needs to be a robust monitoring system while implementation is being done, through which primary data is collected either by independent surveys or certain program data is being fed into a data system that the program sets up to provide feedback at all points of time. Finally, at the end of the program, or when we are thinking about scaling up, the evaluation bit is very important. So the final evaluation is almost always a third-party driven exercise, and that heavily depends on primary data. And similarly, this evidence that the evaluation and monitoring exercises throw up should provide a lot of insights to the leadership to think about how these evidence can actually inform program changes or scale up it in itself. So in all of these stages, as you would have seen, primary data becomes really important, and as a result, data quality. So first, to understand data quality, we have to understand where data quality errors might creep in. So three ways. One is that someone might systematically misunderstand the questions that we are asking, either to the beneficiaries or even to the program managers. The second, there may be falsification of responses, and the third, there may be misentries. So all of these may lead to biased measurement. So at all stages of time, our idea should be to think of how, before collecting a data, during collecting a data, or after we have collected a data, these three major types of errors can be rectified. The major strategies are actually targeted batches, which is going again and collecting the same data to understand that whether the data that you have collected is all right or not. And the second is logical checks, which can also apply to secondary data. So you create a set of logical checks for the data that is incoming to ascertain that whether data that is outside your logical boundaries or just logical conclusion should be accepted or not. So hopefully by a combination of all of this, we will be in a better stage to ascertain that the data that we are using as a part of our program design and program management is of high quality or not.